Hello, and welcome to an overview of how to use the HRSA Provider Relief Fund, or PRF, reporting portal. This video will demonstrate the process of logging in and using the portal to report funds received during the period of availability. For additional information, please refer to the PRF Reporting Portal User Guide. Reporting entities should review the most recently published Post-Payment Notice of Reporting Requirements, or NORR, available on the PRF Reporting Requirements and Auditing website for information about reporting requirements. PRF and/or ARP rural recipients must attest to terms and conditions which require compliance with reporting requirements. Reporting requirements are statutorily required for PRF and/or ARP rural payments. PRF recipients who received one or more payments exceeding $10,000 in the aggregate during a payment received period are required to report in each applicable reporting time period. Recipients of ARP rural, PRF general, and targeted distributions, including the nursing home infection control distribution, are required to report on the use of funds. The reporting time periods apply to all past and future ARP rural and/or PRF payments, and recipients not in compliance may be subject to repayment and/or debt collection. These reporting requirements do not apply to the Rural Health Clinic COVID-19 testing program or claims reimbursements from the HRSA COVID-19 Uninsured Program and the HRSA COVID-19 Coverage Assistance Fund. If you received payments meeting the established monetary threshold during multiple payment received periods, the recipient is required to report during each of the corresponding reporting time periods. The reporting portal will refer to general and other targeted distribution payments with the exception of ARP rural payments and nursing home infection control payments as other PRF payments. Recipients of ARP rural and/or PRF payments agreed to terms and conditions which require compliance with reporting requirements. The terms and conditions state that recipients may use funds for eligible healthcare-related expenses and lost revenues to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus. Nursing home infection control, NHIC, payments have separate terms and conditions and may not be used to reimburse lost revenues. When reporting, you must follow your basis of accounting, such as cash or accrual, to determine expenses. Maintain adequate documentation to substantiate the use of ARP rural and/or PRF payments and ensure that expenses and lost revenues have not already been reimbursed and are not obligated to be reimbursed by other sources. Users that have already registered as PRF Reporting Portal users can enter the portal by clicking on the Login button displayed under the already a registered PRF Reporting Portal user. After clicking the blue Login button, enter your username and password created during the registration process, then complete the CAPTCHA. Portal users must also enter the TIN associated with the username. If an invalid TIN is entered more than 3 times, the account will be locked for 15 minutes before the user can try again. The PRF Reporting Portal has enhanced the portal security by integrating two-factor authentication, also known as 2FA. If you have not configured your 2FA, the portal login process will require you to set up your 2FA preference before continuing to log in. By default, 2FA method is set to email. The reporting portal preferred verification method is email. The email may take up to 10 minutes to be received by the user. Upon successful validation of the username and password, a 2FA verification code will be emailed to the email address in the user's PRF Reporting Portal contact profile. Enter the 2FA verification code and click the blue Continue to Login button. Users can request a verification code 3 times before the account is locked for 15 minutes. After that, the user may request a code again. You may select to receive the 2FA verification code through SMS on a mobile device. To receive the verification code via SMS, please click on the SMS radio button and click on the Update Mobile Number hyperlink below the mobile number text box. The mobile number text box will be enabled, allowing the user to enter the mobile phone number. Once an SMS-capable mobile phone number has been entered, click on the Send Code button. An email will be sent verifying a new verification method was added to the PRF Reporting Portal user account. You will receive the verification code on the mobile phone. Enter the verification code in the text box and click the Submit button. If you have forgotten your password, clicking the Forgot Password link will allow you to reset your password by entering a valid username and PIN. On the password reset screen, enter a new password in the associated field and re-enter the password in the Confirm Password field. Per the password policy, passwords must meet the requirements of a minimum of 15 characters, include 3 of the 4 character types, uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and special characters, and not be the same as the username or any part of the contact name, nor be reused within your last 24 passwords. And finally, not contain any variation of the word password. Once completed, please click the Continue button. A password reset successful pop-up will display. Click the Login button to continue. An email will also be sent to the email on file as confirmation. You can contact the provider support line at 866-569-3522, for TTY dial 711 if you have forgotten your username or if you did not receive a link to reset your password. Please note, if a maintenance task is in process, there will be a system-provided pop-up that informs you to wait a specified period of time before attempting to log in again. As a provider, if no payment information is found in the attestation files for your account, you will receive a message regarding running a batch job with further instructions on what is needed to proceed. Once successfully logged in, you will come to the Terms and Conditions of the reporting portal. Starting with the Terms and Conditions screen, Contextual Help has been provided on every page of the PRF reporting portal to offer assistance without requiring the need to read the full documentation. To access, click the Need Help on this page button. The system provides a pop-up with a list of help articles associated with the page. If you still need more help, click Still Need Help, open a case to create a customer support case. A form will open so that you can create a case for customer support. Your contact name will pre-populate. This cannot be modified. Complete the required fields. Once done, click the Submit button. To see a list of all help articles associated with the PRF reporting portal, click the All FAQs button. The system will provide a list of the pages in the portal that contain help articles by order of where the page falls in the reporting flow. Scroll through the list to select the topic you want more information about. When selected, the system will provide all related help articles in alphabetical order. Click the close icon to close the pop-up. Click the close icon to close the Contextual Help feature. To continue in the reporting portal, accept the terms and conditions by clicking the radio button and click the blue Next button. The report summary landing page is the first page that displays after reading and accepting the PRF reporting portal terms and conditions. The purpose of this page is to provide a summary view of all reports. Active registration information is displayed in the page header. The active registration information displays the PRF portal username, the partner provider name, and the last login date in the header of all reporting portal pages. If the business has a doing business as DBA name in their profile, the DBA name will be displayed. The report summary landing page includes the user's active and inactive reports, report status, the reporting period dates, payments received, dates, and funds available. These are organized into the active and inactive reports tabs. The first tab, labeled Active Reports, displays reports within the current reporting period or if a report has been unlocked. You can access active reports by clicking the report name within the Active Reports table. Only active reports can be edited. The second tab is labeled Inactive Reports and displays reports for past and future reporting periods. If this tab contains no data, that means no reports were submitted for any prior reporting period. Only active reports may be edited. Finally, HRSA has provided a Reporting Resources and FAQs button on each of its reporting portal pages. On clicking the button, you will find links to a library of resources, such as Reporting Guide, FAQs, tutorials, and other resources to assist you in reporting. After clicking on an active report, you will come to the Entity Overview page. You will navigate the portal through a series of pages in a sequential order, completing data entry for one step before proceeding to the next, as the data entered in some pages affect later pages. From the Entity Overview page forward, progress is displayed via a bar at the top of each portal page. Blue circles represent steps that have been completed. A white circle with a blue outline represents the current step, and gray circles represent steps yet to be completed. Pages must be completed in order. It is not possible to skip steps to view subsequent pages. Hovering over the journey bar will show all the steps forthcoming in the reporting process. The blue circle will change to a check mark when that portion of the reporting process has been completed. When navigating through the portal, users should not use the back or forward options provided by a web browser in between screens. This will lead to the loss of any data entered on the page. Rather, you can save partial information by clicking on the blue Save and Next or the red Save and Exit buttons. You can return to a previous page by clicking the blue Previous button. Please note that clicking on the Previous button without saving information will result in data loss. When not actively entering data, you should exit the portal by clicking the red Save and Exit button. Do not exit the portal by closing the browser window or navigate away from the current page using the browser window, as data entered on the current page will not be saved. Other conventions used in the PRF reporting portal include a red asterisk denotes a required field on each portal page. If one of these fields has not been completed or has not been entered as required, a red error message will appear describing the error and must be corrected before proceeding to the next page within the portal. Tooltips are denoted as a lowercase I in a gray circle and provide additional information about the fields, such as definitions and specifications for formatting. To see a tooltip, hover over the icon to learn additional details. The Entity Overview page is the first step in the reporting process. If a reporting entity has reported in a previous reporting period, this page will pre-populate and may be edited. Please confirm all of the information is accurate and up to date before proceeding to the next page of reporting. The Entity Overview page is organized into 3 different areas: the Entity Overview, Physical Address, as it appears on the IRS Form W-9, and Contact Information. The first section of the page under the header Entity Overview includes the following required fields: 10. Business name. Provider type, not pre-populated. and provider subtype, also not pre-populated. The 9-digit TIN may not be changed and should be the TIN of the reporting entity. You may also provide a doing business as or DBA name, which is optional and is not pre-populated for first-time users. Please note it is important to confirm that the TIN is entered accurately as it cannot be changed. Users must select the provider type and provider subtype that best describes the type of practice by clicking the drop-down menus. Subtypes are conditional to the provider types. Select the combination that best describes the reporting entity's type of business. If multiple provider types or provider subtypes apply, choose the pair that reflects the majority of the business. After the entity overview information, the address, as it appears on IRS Form W-9, and contact information sections are shown. All these fields are pre-populated from registration or the previous reporting period. Any information that has changed should be updated here. Required fields include street, state or territory, selected from a drop-down list, city, and zip code, entered as 5 numeric digits. Contact information includes first name, last name, optional title, email, and phone number. The email address must be a valid, monitored email address as it will be used for future necessary communications. On this page, consider the following actions before saving. 1. Confirm the information in the entity overview and address by using the same information on the IRS Form W-9. 2. Ensure the contact email address is a valid, monitored email address. 3. Add PRF reporting -no reply at HRSA.gov to the safe sender list of the contact email address account owner. Before proceeding, confirm all information, including the TIN, has been accurately completed. If there is an issue with any of the information on this page, you should contact the provider support line at 866-569-3522. For TTY dial 711. Only after all the required data entry fields are completed without any error messages will you be able to advance to the next step in the reporting process. Click the blue Save and Next button to proceed to the next page, Subsidiary Questionnaire. Note: when you advance beyond the Entity Overview page, a previous button appears which enables navigation back to previous pages. The next page is the Subsidiary Questionnaire. It contains conditional questions that will affect how the reporting entity proceeds through the portal. The purpose of this page is to collect information about subsidiary entities for any reporting entities that are parent organizations. This includes parent entities for any reporting entities that are a subsidiary of a parent. A more detailed look at the Subsidiary Questionnaire shows that it is comprised of 4 required questions with 2 conditional questions depending on the reporting entity's answers. These conditional questions will affect your journey through the portal. The accuracy of data on this page is extremely important. Selecting yes to any of these questions will prompt you to provide more detailed information in the following page. Do you have any subsidiaries that are eligible healthcare providers? Did you acquire, merge, or divest subsidiaries that are eligible healthcare providers during the period of availability or payment received period of funds? These mean if you are the parent of subsidiaries that are healthcare entities, and if you acquired, divested, or merged subsidiaries during the period of availability of funds, your answers to both of these questions will be yes. Next, is a parent entity reporting on your general distribution payment? Note: a parent entity may not report on your targeted distribution payments. Please enter the TIN of the parent entity reporting on your behalf for the general distribution payments. If your organization is a subsidiary of a parent organization and the parent is reporting on your general distribution payment, you should answer yes to the third question. If you answer yes to the third question, you will need to enter the TIN of your parent. Do not re-enter your own TIN here. Followed by: Were any targeted distribution payment you are currently reporting on transferred to or by a parent entity? Note: please select No if you are not currently reporting on targeted distribution payments, entity reporting on your general distribution payment. Note: a parent entity may not report on your targeted distribution payment. The last required question asks whether any of your targeted distribution payments were transferred to or by a parent entity. You should answer no if you are not a subsidiary, you did not receive a targeted distribution payment, or you retained your targeted distribution payment. If you did transfer all or part of a targeted distribution payment, you will answer yes and indicate the total dollar amount transferred. It is important to note that answering yes to this question and entering a dollar amount does not satisfy the reporting requirement in the terms and conditions. The next page is subsidiary information, and it might not be applicable to all users. Depending on the answers given in the previous step, the subsidiary information page will show different date entry tables or fields. There is a pop-up reminder to ensure that all information is accurate on this page before proceeding. Click the blue "Got It" button to close the pop-up window. You will need to add subsidiaries that are eligible healthcare entities even if they did not receive an ARP rural and/or PRF payment, and even if they are not reporting on if they did not receive an ARP rural and/or PRF payments those subsidiaries received. If you have reported in a previous reporting period or revised a previous report, the acquired, divested, merged subsidiaries and subsidiary information tables on the subsidiary data page will pre-populate with previously submitted data. Acquired, divested, merged subsidiaries will be shown only if you selected yes to the second question: did you acquire, divest, or merge subsidiaries that are eligible healthcare providers during the period of availability of funds in the previous step? For first-time users, the acquired, divested, merged subsidiaries table will be blank and will need to be completed before proceeding further. You should enter information about all acquisitions, divestitures, and mergers that occurred during the period of availability. Reporting entities that acquired, divested, or merged related subsidiaries, change of ownership, during the period of availability must indicate the change in ownership. You will complete the subsidiary table by entering the following fields and then click the green Add button. TIN of acquired, divested, merged subsidiary. Users must enter the 9-digit TIN of the subsidiary. Special characters may not be used. The reporting entity will need to add the subsidiary TIN to the table even if the subsidiary did not receive and/or transfer a PRF and/or ARP rural payment. Acquired, divested, or merged. Users must choose acquired, divested, or merged from the drop-down list. Effective date of the acquisition, divestiture, merger. The effective date should fall within the period of availability. If acquired, provide the TIN of a divesting entity. If divested, provide the TIN of an acquiring entity. The TIN should be 9 digits with no special characters. Total dollar amount received for TIN. The dollar amount entered may be up to 14 digits, including 2 decimal places with no special characters. A dollar sign will auto-populate within the table. Percentage of ownership. The percentage amount must be a whole number. Special characters may not be used. Did or do you hold a controlling interest? Select yes or no from the drop-down list. Please note, do not enter the reporting entity's TIN in the subsidiary table. Users must add all subsidiaries that meet the definition of eligible healthcare providers, even if there is no general distribution payment to report on and even if subsidiaries did not receive a PRF payment. For the purposes of PRF reporting, eligible healthcare providers are defined as public entities, Medicare or Medicaid enrolled suppliers and providers, and such for-profit entities and not-for-profit entities as the Secretary may specify within the United States, including territories that provide diagnoses, testing, or care for individuals with possible or actual cases of COVID-19. It is important to add all subsidiaries that meet the definition of eligible healthcare providers even if it says TIN not found in the PRF payment file. Also, it is recommended to download the list of subsidiaries as a spreadsheet to confirm submitted subsidiary TINs. It is very important that the table of subsidiaries is correct because the user will only be able to report on a subsidiary's general distribution payment if the subsidiary TIN is correct in this table and if the box "I am a parent reporting on this TIN's general distribution payment" is selected. If a user has reported in a previous reporting period or revised a previous report, the acquired divested merged table will contain data from the previous reporting period. The user must ensure data is accurate. Because the periods of availability of funds overlap, data entered during previous reporting periods should be accurate. Proceeding further, the next page is the payments to recipients, and if no payment information is found in the attestation files for your account, you will receive a message regarding a batch job with instructions on what you should do. If TIN data is not found in the attestation file and the attestation summary doesn't have report-specific data, the system will provide a pop-up as seen here with the message of the PRF reporting portal is currently under maintenance. Please try to log in again in 1 hour. Please ensure that all payments you received are for the payment received period that you attested to, kept and are reporting on are included in the table under the applicable section. Please note that Rural Health Clinic, RHC COVID-19 testing program payments and/or RHC COVID-19 testing and mitigation program payments made to PRF recipients are not included in any of the 3 summary tables as these payments have different reporting requirements. Payments made to subsidiaries will be included in the summary tables based on the subsidiary information entered on the previous subsidiary information page. However, if you didn't receive funds greater than $10,000, you will be prompted to exit and stop reporting. Although the payments to recipient page is read-only, at the bottom of the screen, you will be asked to verify the accuracy of the information as it appears. If applicable, the system will provide information regarding the Total American Rescue Plan, ARP Rural, Total Skilled Nursing Facility and Nursing Home Infection Control, and total other PRF payments that the provider received. The portal will show the following columns: TIN of recipient, distribution amount deposited, amount returned, amount retained, and already reported. If a payment has already been reported on by another TIN, it will be noted in this column. If you've recently returned a full or partial payment, please wait 2 to 3 weeks for it to appear in the PRF reporting portal. Full returns will display in the Total Rejected Payments, Attestation Rejected table on the Payments to Recipient page. Partial returns will display under the column of Amount Returned under the Total Skilled Nursing Facility and Nursing Home Infection Control Payments table and Total Other Provider Relief Fund Payments table. If the information on this page is not accurate, select No and provide a description of the reason the information is inaccurate in the Dispute Comments field. A pop-up window appears directing you that any dispute must be resolved by contacting the provider support line. If there are no disputes, select Yes to verify the accuracy of the information as it appears. The download is recommended, but not required. Click Save and Next. For your convenience, a spreadsheet for your payments is downloadable by clicking the provider. It is recommended to download the Provider Relief Fund Payments spreadsheet. This is intended to assist you in reconciling the payment amounts for the reporting period. The download is recommended, but not required. Click Save and Next. The next page is American Rescue Plan, ARP Rural Distribution Payments Subsidiary Attestation. This page displays if the provider received an ARP rural payment, they will be required to indicate whether any of the funds were allocated to a subsidiary. ARP rural payments were distributed to parent organizations who may have then allocated ARP rural payments to qualifying subsidiaries in accordance with HRSA's instructions provided in the ARP rural payment letter. Moving forward, this page is organized into 3 different areas: interest earned on payments, tax information, and single audit information. Note, this page may contain pre-populated information from registration and/or a previous report. Please verify that all information is accurate before continuing. If applicable, these fields are conditionally displayed if funds were received. Here you will provide the interest earned amounts on payments form payment date through expense date for American Rescue Plan, ARP rural payments, nursing home infection control payments, Phase 4 general distribution payments separately from any interest earned on other PRF payments. Next, complete the tax information as applicable to your entity. Lastly, if applicable, provide your single audit information as it pertains to your entity. As a reminder, any recipient that expends $750,000 or more in federal financial assistance during their fiscal year are subject to single audit requirements, as set forth in the regulations at 45 CFR 75 Subpart F. The Schedule of Expenditures of Federal Awards, CEFA audit is typically performed by an independent certified public accountant, CPA. For more information, please refer to the Independent Audit Fact Sheet. Again, interest earned is calculated from the date the payment was received until the date of expenditure and must be used and reported on in accordance with the payment terms and conditions. The reported interest earned will be included in your total reportable payments and reflected in the payment summary tables discussed next. The fields on the screen will be provided based upon which interest-bearing payments were received by the provider, which include ARP rural payments, nursing home infection control payments, and other PRF payments, including Phase 4 payments. These include interest earned on PRF Phases 1, 2, and 3, general distribution payments and targeted distribution payments. They do not include interest earned on PRF Phase 4, general distribution payments. The next page is the payment summary, which is also pre-populated based on your answers to previous questions and payments received. The table on this page is read-only. It contains a line-by-line breakout of your total payments by type and subcategories for the payment received period. Payments received outside of the period will not be included. It is imperative to verify that all information on this page is correct before proceeding to the next page. Please remember that the total reportable payments amount for the reporting period in which you are reporting in is the total of all payments attested to and kept for payments issued in addition to any interest earned on these payments. If you believe information on this page is incorrect, please contact HRSA's provider support line. Review the pre-populated information for accuracy for any payments received. Tooltips are provided next to each value to explain how it was calculated. This next page is Other Assistance Received. Other assistance received is comprised of one large table where reporting entities must report other related assistance received by the reporting entity and its subsidiaries included in reporting as applicable by quarter during the period of availability that corresponds to the current reporting period. This page may contain pre-populated information from registration and/or a previous report. Please ensure that the information is accurate before proceeding. HRSA will use the information to better understand how providers were supported during the coronavirus pandemic above and beyond the PRF payments they received. The other assistance received reported to HRSA will not be used in the calculation of expenses or lost revenues. Reporting entities are expected to make a determination of their expenses applied to ARP rural and/or PRF payments after considering other assistance received and taking into account that ARP rural and/or PRF payments may not be used for expenses or lost revenues that other sources have reimbursed or that other sources are obligated to reimburse. All other assistance received must be reported on this page. Do not include payments on this page if they are Provider Relief Fund General Distribution, Provider Relief Fund Targeted Distribution, American Rescue Plan, ARP Rural, and Nursing Home Infection Control payments. This page may contain pre-populated information. Please verify for accuracy. The system will auto-populate RHC COVID-19 testing funds and RHC COVID-19 testing and mitigation funds separately. You will enter expenses against payments that have been received. These next pages are the ARP rural distribution payments, if applicable for eligible expenses or lost revenues, and are conditional upon ARP rural payments received. You are required to report on your use of all ARP rural payments. You must report on the use of these payments by indicating the quarterly expenses reimbursed with these payments. If you did not use these payments to reimburse allowable expenses, you may enter 0. Reporting entities that expend all ARP rural payments will not be able to select a lost revenues option. Instead, these entities will need to submit patient care revenues for the period of availability. As a reminder, ARP rural payments must be used for expenses unreimbursed by other sources and that other sources are not obligated to reimburse. All fields marked with an asterisk are required. The number entered may be a value up to 14 digits, including 2 decimal places. If expenses are 0, you must enter a 0. The tab key may be used to navigate between cells during data entry. In order to fill out aggregate conditions, follow. If you received less than $500,000, the abbreviated expenses table will display. If you received more than $10,000 but less than $500,000 in total PRF, you are only required to report on the use of these payments by general administrative expenses and healthcare expenses. If you received greater than or equal to $500,000, the detailed expenses table displays. If you received $500,000 or greater in total PRF payments, you are required to report in greater detail within the 2 categories previously mentioned. All expenses should be entered by calendar year quarter. All data entry fields on this page are required in order to proceed to the next page. If there are no expenses to enter for a category or calendar quarter, you may enter the number 0 in each data entry field. Users should not report more than the payment amount shown. If you expend all of your ARP rural funds on ARP rural expenses, upon clicking Save and Next, you will proceed through to the NHIC and other PRF expenses pages. If you did not expend all your ARP rural funds on ARP rural expenses, upon clicking Save and Next, you will be taken to the Lost Revenues Questionnaire. Once completed, please click the blue Save and Next button. This is the Nursing Home Infection Control, or NHIC, expenses page for payments received during the payment period and are conditional on NHIC payments received. The eligibility requirements for these payments are limited. Therefore, if you did not receive an NHIC payment during the applicable payment received period, you will not see this page. Per the authorizing legislation, the original recipient of the NHIC payment must report on the payment since it is a targeted distribution payment. NHIC payments include those paid as part of the Quality Incentive Payment, or QIP, program. You may use NHIC for eligible expenses incurred prior to receipt of those payments, for example, pre-award costs, as long as they are to prevent, prepare for, and/or respond to coronavirus. Because the NHIC payments have a limited use, expenses for these payments are reported separately from ARP rural payments and all other PRF payments. NHIC payments may only be used for infection control expenses and may not be used to reimburse lost revenues. You may report use of these payments only for infection control expenses that have not been reimbursed by other sources and that other sources are not obligated to reimburse. You may only enter total expenses up to the total amount of reportable nursing home infection control payments. All fields marked with an asterisk are required. The number entered may be a value up to 14 digits, including 2 decimal places. If expenses are 0, the reporting entity must enter a 0. The tab key may be used to navigate between cells during data entry. In order to fill out aggregate conditions, follow. If you received less than $500,000, the abbreviated expenses table displays. If you received more than $10,000 but less than $500,000 in total PRF, you are only required to report on the use of these payments by general administrative expenses and healthcare expenses. If you received greater than or equal to $500,000, the detailed expenses table displays. If you received $500,000 or greater in total PRF payments, you are required to report in greater detail within the two categories previously mentioned. All expenses should be entered by calendar year quarter. All data entry fields on this page are required in order to proceed to the next page. If there are no expenses to enter for a category or calendar quarter, you may enter the number 0 in each data entry field. You cannot report more than the payment amount shown. Once completed, please click the blue Save and Next button. This next page is Other PRF Expenses for payments received during payment period. You are required to report on your use of all other Provider Relief Fund payments. You must report on the use of these payments by indicating the quarterly expenses reimbursed with these payments. If you did not use these payments to reimburse allowable expenses, you may enter 0. As a reminder, Provider Relief Fund payments must be used for expenses unreimbursed by other sources and that other sources are not obligated to reimburse. All fields marked with an asterisk are required. The number entered may be a value up to 14 digits, including 2 decimal places. If expenses are 0, the reporting entity must enter a 0. The Tab key may be used to navigate between cells during data entry. You should not include expenses reimbursed by NHIC payments on this page. You can only be reimbursed for expenses that another source has not reimbursed and is not obligated to reimburse. You may use PRF payments for eligible expenses or lost revenues incurred prior to receipt of those payments. For example, pre-award costs, so long as they are to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus. However, HHS expects that it would be highly unusual for providers to have incurred eligible expenses or lost revenues prior to January 1, 2020. In order to fill out aggregate conditions, please follow. If you received less than $500,000, the abbreviated expenses table display. If you received more than $10,000 but less than $500,000 in total PRF, you are only required to report on the use of these payments by general administrative expenses and healthcare expenses. If you received greater than or equal to $500,000, the detailed expenses table displays. If you received $500,000 or greater in total PRF payments, you are required to report in greater detail within the two categories previously mentioned. All expenses should be entered by calendar year quarter. All data entry fields on this page are required in order to proceed to the next page. If there are no expenses to enter for a category or calendar quarter, you may enter the number 0 in each data entry field. You cannot report more than the payment amount shown. Once completed, please click the blue Save and Next button. This next page is Unreimbursed Expenses attributable to COVID-19, where you can indicate whether you have expenses attributable to coronavirus that remain unreimbursed. You should report these unreimbursed expenses by calendar year quarter. Please consider all other financial assistance received, including your ARP rural and/or PRF payments, when determining unreimbursed expenses reported on this worksheet. This worksheet is used by HRSA for informational purposes only. The net unreimbursed expenses attributable to COVID-19 reported to HRSA will not be used in the calculation of expenses or lost revenues. All fields marked with an asterisk are required. The number entered may be a value up to 14 digits, including 2 decimal places. If expenses are 0, the reporting entity must enter a 0. The Tab key may be used to navigate between cells during data entry. You should consider your ARP rural payment and all PRF payments, the funding sources provided in the Other Assistance Received table, and all other potential sources. The information collected on this page is not used in the calculation of PRF expenses or lost revenues. Once completed, click the blue Save and Next button to proceed. The next step is Actual Patient Care Revenue. The actual patient care revenue page appears only if ARP rural payments and/or PRF payments you are reporting on now were fully expended on expenses, and if ARP rural payments and/or PRF payments were fully expended on expenses during a previous reporting period. If this page appears, the values for calendar years 2019, 2020, and 2021 will be pre-populated. You may edit the values for calendar years 2019, 2020, and 2021, and you are required to enter a value for calendar year 2022. If you reported lost revenues during a previous reporting period, this page will not appear. When finished, click Save and Next. The Lost Revenues questionnaire will display if your total reportable payments is greater than your ARP rural expense and/or other PRF expenses reported. In other words, your ARP rural payments and/or PRF payments were not fully expended on expenses. This is where you will be required to select a method for calculating lost revenues. As a reminder, NHIC payments may not be used for lost revenues and will not figure into the calculation of PRF and/or ARP rural payments applied to the lost revenues, if not fully expended on coronavirus-related healthcare expenses. If your reported lost revenue in a previous reporting period and future periods for which you are required to report, you will be able to change your lost revenues methodology. However, if you decide to change your methodology, you must use the new method to calculate lost revenues for the entire period of availability. The data submitted during a previous reporting period will not pre-populate into your current reporting period report, and you will be required to complete a justification for the change. If applicable, the calculation method used in a previously submitted report will pre-populate. Should you want to change the calculation method used, you will be required to provide a justification for the change. Lost revenues is the next step. Depending on the reporting entity selection on the Lost Revenues questionnaire, one of the 3 pages will be shown. Each of the 3 pages will determine the calculation of all lost revenues, and the calculation will be applied to the balance of the other PRF payments after reported expenses are deducted to determine the total dollar amount of PRF and/or ARP rural payments expended for the payment received period. Please verify the accuracy of the data, as these pages may be pre-populated. Other things to keep in mind are that the justification for change to previously submitted data has an 80-character minimum. Another option for calculating lost revenues is a comparison of budgeted lost revenues to actual lost revenues during calendar years 2020, 2021, and 2022. If you opt for this method, you will be required to report your budgeted and actual revenue by payer type for each quarter during calendar years 2020, 2021, and 2022. Your lost revenues will be calculated by quarter for each quarter in calendar year 2020, 2021, and 2022, using the corresponding quarter in your approved budget as the baseline. Please note, you may only select this option if you have a budget that covers the entire period of availability. In this case, through December 31st, 2022. That was approved prior to March 27th, 2020. You must also submit your budget approved prior to March 27th, 2020, and an attestation by a CEO, CFO, or other similarly responsible individual representing your organization that this budget was approved prior to March 27th, 2020. If you selected this option during a previous reporting period, you will be able to review your previously submitted uploads by clicking on Preview or Download. If choosing this method again, data will be pre-populated, but you will be able to edit the pre-populated fields, and you must enter new values in required quarters of that calendar year. You will also need to upload a new attestation and budget covering the entire period of availability, which now includes quarters 3 and 4 of calendar year 2022. The third and final option for calculating lost revenues is to use an alternate reasonable methodology. HRSA has not defined this methodology, and it will be up to you to enter the quarterly lost revenues by quarter for the entire period of availability. Whether you are using this method for the first time or reusing it from a previous reporting period, you must also submit or resubmit a narrative document describing your methodology for calculating lost revenues, an explanation of why the method is reasonable, and a description establishing how lost revenues were attributable to coronavirus. You must also submit the calculation of lost revenues that uses the methodology described in the narrative document. Data will be pre-populated, but you will be able to edit the pre-populated fields. You must enter new values for quarters 3 and 4 of calendar year 2022. If electing for option 3, please note using this method for calculating lost revenues increases the likelihood of an audit by HRSA. Other things to keep in mind for budgeted or alternate reasonable methodology calculation methods: you will be required to upload supporting documentation. If you have uploaded supporting documentation for a previous reporting period, the documentation will be available to preview and/or download. Finally, upon clicking Save and Next or Save and Exit, if you haven't made an entry, the system will alert you to the information that needs to be completed. For actuals or budgeted calculation methods, if any of the tabs have a total value of 0, the system will allow you to make corrections and/or provide justification. If you alter previously submitted data, then change your mind later, upon returning to the page and selecting No in the Do You Want to Change Values from the Previous Reporting Period drop-down, the system will repopulate the latest submitted data. The Lost Revenues Summary. The Period of Availability page only displays if you applied ARP rural payments and/or PRF payments to lost revenues. This page displays a read-only table of lost revenues by calendar year quarter for 2020, 2021, and 2022, based on the system calculated change in patient care revenue or based on your calculation of lost revenues from your alternate reasonable methodology. A cumulative lost revenues total will display at the bottom of the table. The Financial Summary page displays read-only pre-populated values based on calculations from data entered during the reporting process. The Financial Summary may be printed using the web browser. Please note that this screen is specific to reporting period 4 and will not be available for reporting periods 1, 2, or 3. This read-only page requires no validation or data entry. Tooltips are provided next to each value to explain how it was calculated. The first table is the ARP Rural Summary. If you received an ARP Rural payment, this summarizes how ARP Rural payments were applied. If you received nursing home infection control payments, you will see a summary describing the amount reportable, amount spent, and amount remaining. This is the second table, which summarizes how nursing home infection control payments were applied. If the total remaining in used nursing home infection control payments is greater than 0, you did not use all of these payments to reimburse expenses and remaining funds are due within 30 days to HRSA. Please note, any nursing home infection control payments remaining after applying them toward infection control expenses may not be used to reimburse lost revenues and must be returned to HRSA. The third table is the Other PRF Summary, and it summarizes how other PRF payments were applied to expenses. If the total reportable ARP rural and/or total reportable other PRF payments remaining to be applied to lost revenues is greater than 0, you did not use all these payments to reimburse expenses. You will also see a Lost Revenues Summary. Because the period of availability for ARP rural payment and/or PRF payments overlaps with each subsequent reporting period, any unused lost revenues may be reimbursed by ARP rural payment and/or PRF payments received during later payment periods. It is important to note that the portal will capture and adjust for changes to your lost revenues calculations. Finally, please review the report reconciliation table. It is extremely important that you take note of the line item titled Total Unused Amount Due Within 30 Days to HRSA. It is expected that you return this amount no later than 30 days after the close of the reporting period. Money owed to HRSA cannot be carried over to a subsequent reporting period as available funds. If you have unused funds, including any unused interest earned that cannot be expended on allowable expenses or lost revenues attributable to coronavirus by the applicable deadline to use funds, you must return those funds to HRSA. We encourage you to return unused funds immediately after completing the reporting process. The Post-Payment Notice of Reporting Requirements located on the PRF webpage explains returning used funds further. Reporting entities that do not report or return unused funds within the respective reporting time period are out of compliance with payment terms and conditions and may be subject to repayment and/or debt collection for any unreturned ARP rural payment, nursing home infection control, and/or other PRF payments. The next screen is to quantify the impact of COVID-19 on your personnel, patient, and facility metrics. Data will be pre-populated from previous reporting periods. However, you will be required to enter data values for quarters 3 and 4 of calendar year 2022 for all tables. To provide greater clarity, HRSA requests that if you had a change of ownership, acquisition, merger, or other transaction that affected ownership during the period of availability. January 1st, 2020 through December 31st, 2022. Please measure the metrics from the date of the transaction to the end of the period of availability. For further assistance, please refer to the Reporting Portal User Guide for more information on personnel, patient, and facility metrics. An error message will appear if you attempt to proceed to the next page with an empty field or if the value does not meet validation checks. Please see the PRF Reporting Portal User Guide for complete definitions within the Personnel Metrics table. The survey is the last data entry page in the report and is included to evaluate the effects of ARP rural and/or PRF payment on finances and clinical care during the period of availability. This survey consists of 2 sections and should only require a few minutes. A new survey is required for each reporting period and will not pre-populate with data submitted during previous reporting periods. Only consider payments made during the relevant payment period when responding to the survey questions and provide feedback on the benefits or limitations of the payment. The completed survey is required prior to report submission. The Review and Submit page is a summary of all data entered in the report. You will only be able to reach this page if the data entry on all prior pages is complete. You must carefully review this summary for accuracy before submitting the report to HRSA. The headers in this section are collapsible. To collapse or expand a header, click the arrowhead before each section header. Data on this page cannot be edited, but if you see an error, navigate back to the appropriate page using the blue Previous button. You may choose to print the page as a record by using the print option on the web browser. Once the report is submitted, the report will not be able to be edited. You will need to respond to the following questions. Did you report on the use of your RHC COVID-19 testing program and/or RHC COVID-19 testing and mitigation program funds in the RHC portal? This will require you to select yes or no from the drop-down list. This question only appears if the reporting entity or its subsidiaries, as applicable, received RHC COVID-19 testing program and/or RHC COVID-19 testing and mitigation program payments. And do you certify that the above information is accurate to the best of your knowledge? If you select no, then the following message will display. Please click on the previous button at the bottom of the page to go back to correct the inaccurate data. If you select Yes, then you may click the blue Submit button. If the data is correct and you click the blue Submit button, a pop-up message will appear that confirms the intent to submit. If you would like to submit at this time, select I agree, submit. If not, select Save and resume later. All data will be saved and you will be taken back to the Review and Submit page. By answering yes to this question and clicking the Submit button, you will submit the report to HRSA. If funds should be returned to HRSA, the system will allow you to return them after submitting their report. On successful submission of your report, you will receive an email. Please keep this for your records. You will find these additional resources on the PRF Reporting Portal homepage. The PRF Reporting Portal User Guides. One for registration and one for reporting, which outline step-by-step instructions for registration in the portal and the data entry required to complete the report. FAQs on reporting portal-related topics. Portal worksheets that provide a way to collect and record information outside of the reporting portal in preparation for submission of your report. If you have further questions, they can be directed to HRSA's provider support line at 866-569-3522. For TTY dial 711. Hours of operation are 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Central Time, Monday through Friday. Hours are subject to change. Thank you for using the PRF Reporting Portal. Have a great day.